And just as a brief introduction, we do, in neurolanguage coaching, we are blending neuroscience, neuropsychology, emotional intelligence together with professional coaching. And coaching today, well, it seems to be that now it's becoming a very trendy thing. Everybody is a coach. And it becomes more and more. When we look at the coaching industry, it really is booming. Just as a background, we follow the style of non-directive coaching, which is, in fact, the style followed by the International Coach Federation in the US. All of our courses are accredited by the International Coach Federation. And very much when you look at coaching today, there are, in fact, different styles, and all are acceptable. What we actually see from the research is that non-directive coaching does, in fact, have an impact on how the brain reacts. And we'll look at that in a minute. So one of the transitions when you come into coaching as an educator, as a teacher, is this transition from knowing all the information and giving all the information to trying to take a step back and stimulate the learner to discover, uncover. And when we do need to transfer knowledge, we're doing it in a very gentle, with lots of permission style. So coaching is not about telling people what to do. Coaching is about soundboarding, mostly. It's about troubleshooting. It's about setting goals. It's about really helping and accompanying somebody on that journey from A to B. And this, for teachers, is not so easy because we're used to telling advice. We're used to telling people what to do. We're used to giving instructions, giving orders. We're used to having all the answers. And coaching is about stimulating our learners to find their own answers, find their own path. Now, it's not going into therapy and psychotherapy because actually, when we come into coaching, we're more focused on solutions and future. Therapy and psychotherapy are more focused about going into the past. So getting people into the future and into troubleshooting and solutions is actually everything that we are focused on. And in language coaching, if there is something that is blocking, stopping, hindering the learning, we're trying to troubleshoot with professional coaching conversations along the way. And it might be learning how to learn. It might be learning how to break through, how to get to different levels in the language. It may be going beyond the emotional blocks that people may be experiencing. So if we look at the coaching world and what we are bringing from the coaching world into the teaching, into the classroom, into the learning environment, we're definitely bringing in the structure. So we're bringing in this cyclical goal set, work on the goals, goal review, goal set, work on the goals, goal review. And we're really making sure, and from our perspective, from the neuroscience, we know that the brain prefers to work with chunked down material. So this fits perfectly with the goal setting procedure. And as a coach, we are trying to encourage the learners to set the goals. Obviously, that might not be easy because they may not know what language goals they need. And this is where we do this little bit of reverse psychology to help them to set the goals. We're bringing in the spirit of coaching. I think when everybody thinks of coaching, they think of the sports coach, mostly. However, the sports coach, quite directive, and we're not, but we are bringing in this feeling of unleashing potential, helping people to go beyond their limits, empowering. Impacts on the coachee, well, learner autonomy is absolutely increased. And again, from the research, we know that when learners are self-regulating, setting their own goals, creating their own paths, they are much more likely to achieve them. And recent research is actually showing that it's leading to more well-being. And of course, we're bringing in the motivation, the commitment. And from the coach, from our perspective, we're bringing in a very neutral, non-judgmental approach with the learner. And I think this is quite key, because learning is a vulnerable state. And if our learners are feeling judged, or they're feeling a little bit that the teacher is expecting or wanting different results, then it can also affect that learning process. And mostly we are there as equal partners, and we're there to soundboard constantly with our learners. And we're acting as that accountability partner. So this is the part that is coming in from coaching. And coaching in education has been around for over 25 years. However, it has been around from different, I'm going to say from a different perspective, because it's mostly been coaches who have been coaching teachers to enhance their practice, or enhance their curriculum, or enhance their delivery. And a lot of coaching in schools, a lot of coaching in the teams, the staff, among the staff, a lot of coaching to help teachers to troubleshoot, to address specific issues arising in their schools or their classroom, coaching to see how they could stimulate their learners more. What we are doing, however, is actually transforming the teacher. So it's not so much about the teacher receiving coaching, it's about the teacher becoming the coach. And that is the major difference. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of research showing the impact of coaching, but this particular research is, as I said, the research demonstrating the non-directive coaching impact. And we see that it increases the frequency of creative insights. It increases it increases creativity. When we are really getting them to find their way, find their path, set their goals. And we're, I would say, very gentle in that way of being, or using a lot of permission along the way. So how can professional coaching enhance teaching? Well, I do think, and we've said this many, many times, so for those of you who have been to many webinars, forgive the repetition, but I do think that we have a lot of stressed teachers today, and a lot of problems in the classroom. So learners that are finding it difficult to connect, learners that are finding it difficult to communicate, learners who actually, there's quite a lot of aggression being reported in schools, in classrooms, and aggression with teachers as well. So teachers are overworked, underpaid, under-recognized, and dealing with all of this additional stress. Coaching can help teachers to really manage the communication and the conversations with learners in a different way. It can also help teachers not to take on that baggage and burden that they are carrying. It can help them to really manage themselves in a different way. It can really help them to focus on their well-being, and also help them to focus on the learner's well-being as well. Marissa, I can see you nodding there. Good morning, Marissa. I think, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Muy bien. I can see that you have that experience of what I was saying there, and definitely I know that you're probably using the coaching to help in all those aspects that we've just mentioned. Personally, I think there is a worldwide shift. I do think teachers are adapting and changing and moving into this way of delivery, into this new style of using the coaching conversations. And I think teachers are coming into this more and more intuitively. So intuitively, we are trying to adapt to our learners. And what we are doing is really giving more structure and even the reasoning behind what we are doing and how to enhance it and do it more. By the way, I can see some beautiful faces. Marta, good morning. Amanda, good morning. Anna, buenos dias. Nice to see some human faces on the other side there. Thank you for being here. So we changed the patterns of communication. Some very old research which demonstrates that anxiety, and this was around mathematics, anxiety around maths diminishes working memory capacity, attention, and prefrontal cortex functions. Now, if we put that into normal language, the anxiety felt during a learning process is really affecting the parts of the brain that we need for learning, namely executive functions, hippocampus as well. And this is because we often are going into this fight or flight. And when we go into the fight or flight, blood is pumping out of the major organs into the arms, into the legs, so that we can run away or fight. And this is why the survival brain kicks in and the rational, logical, analytical brain is literally taking a backseat. Now, if this is happening when we're learning, obviously we're not in a learning state. And if I am the educator with somebody who is in a fight or flight, with anxiety, with stress, my major focus will be, how do I calm this learner down? And this ties in very nicely with grammar, because I think most of our learners with grammar, even just hearing the word grammar, they go into that state. So this particular research, I think we need to change math anxiety to language and in particular grammar anxiety, and it will be the same. And also the second research in 2012, we see that actually thinking about doing mathematics triggered the pain areas in the brain. So just the thought of doing it, so you can imagine just the thought of doing grammar probably does this to some learners. So we're changing our conversations. We're also adding in the mix some of the neuroscience. Now, I just want to show this because this is quite old. This was back in 2000, in the year 2000, that we were starting to think about brain-based and effective learning. And in fact, it was the Dana Foundation back in the 1990s that created this concept of neuroeducation, which is the integration of the neuroscience, neuropsychology, emotional intelligence, all of these disciplines into education. Long time ago. Now, it feels like we're starting to come into integrating it after all these years. And I do think it's interesting because most of what is listed here is what we are taking into account in everything that we do in our process. And the process of delivery of the coaching conversations, how we're integrating this question of the brain and how it reacts, how it functions, how it learns. And some of the comments here I think are beautiful. You know, the search for meaning is innate, which means our brain is constantly trying to understand our world. It's one of the major missions of the brain to understand. And each and every one of us, in a different way, we're really unique. So I'm trying to understand my world, you're trying to understand your world. And as an educator, how do I help my learner understand? And I often have this sort of, recently, I often talk about the fact that if the brain has an open tab, You know, we work in computers all day, every day. Just imagine our brain as a computer. If there is an open tab in the brain, you all know that you have that little voice that just keeps on and on and on with that open tab. And why, and why, and why. And as soon as you find the answer, it's closed. And when we're learning, and if we've got a learner who is with those questions and without understanding something, until they understand it, that's going to be an open tab. So I do think as an educator, we're trying to help them to close those tabs, bring the understanding. This is the reason for this. This is the reason for that. And also understanding that the brain loves patterning, and the brain instantly goes into patterning. So how can we provoke that more? All the way through, and especially when we're going through grammar conversations. And emotions are critical to patterning. They have to be in the right emotional state. If they're nervous, tense, anxious, stressed, frightened, ashamed, embarrassed, they're not the right emotions to help them to go into that learning. So everything on this list is relevant, and it's something that we need to take into account with most of what we do when we're in that learning space. And right at the bottom there, it says experience-based learnings are the best ways to use spatial memory. Well, I do think this is the reason that grammar conversations, instant grammar conversations, instantly getting them into using it, bringing out their experiences, bringing out their personal, real content, is helping them to connect in to what they're learning. Task-based learning as well, anything that's going to get them into doing things. And this is why it's so important not just to be reading and looking and writing grammar. It's this transformation into using it, living it. And every brain is unique. This is the era where educators are starting to adapt to the learners and not the learner adapting to the educator. But it's not easy, because we have to become very flexible. We have to become very, I'm even going to say chameleonic. We have to know how to tap in, understand, and then adapt to each and every learner. And if you've got a group of learners, that again is not easy. And we have to understand the concept of neuroplasticity, the fact that the brain can change. We know the brain isn't static. We know that at any age we can learn. By the way, I'm just looking at embarking on my next learning journeys. So at any age we can learn. And again, understanding how to speak with mature learners who don't believe they can learn. And bring this concept to them, share some of the research with them, share, things that can be done to help people to learn. I do think when we get into a mature brain, and there is a beautiful book called The Middle-Aged Brain, our brain becomes more selective as we get older. And the relevance of what we're learning is key. If you are working with mature brains, you really need to understand what's going to make it relevant for you, for your brain to learn this. And again, we come back to real, personal, context, experiential. That's going to be absolutely key. And not wasting time. I always think with language learning books, if I don't pick them up anymore now, I just dip in and out. But in the old days, and still some, they sort of get to chapter 3 and it's giving directions. If chapter 3 is giving directions, I've thrown the book away, because I just do not want to be able to give directions in a language as some of the first things to say. And here, what we're doing is we're tapping into our learner to find out, what do you want to use the language for? What is your focus of this language? And let's go for that. So we're really homing in to our learners' requirements and needs. More than anything else, we're not wasting time. And learning is firing and wiring. You know, learning new information is that creation of new neural networks. And I do think it's interesting to understand, how can we get them to learn instantly? How can we really bring in the impactive learning that means that they're going to get it? You know, when people have insights, that flash of inspiration or that flash of understanding, when you've had an insight, you've got it, and you've got it forever. And I think that's what we're looking for. And we go back to the research that we had at the beginning. Non-directive coaching provokes more creative insights. So we actually have to become provocateur. We have to be provoking those connections. Bearing in mind the emotional brain, keeping them calm, bearing in mind the bite-sized chunks, the information coming in a step by step by step, logical build-up of the language. And in this respect, we have to understand how to break the grammar down. We have to understand how to do that ourselves. And when I say that, I mean, we have to understand the big picture first to then break it down. And also breaking functional language down. How do we do that? And then provoking the learner autonomy and the ownership to really get them to do the work, them to discover or uncover, and them to make the connections. You know, we are very focused on how the brain likes to learn. And the research in 2016 demonstrates that when we are learning our native our target language, our brain is going to the native grammar areas first. This is how the brain learns. The brain scaffolds. It tries to connect with what it already knows. And this is where we have to provoke and provoke and provoke those connections. And also get curious about mistakes. Instead of just correcting them, ask them, where does that mistake come from? It's curiosity from our side, which actually helps their curiosity to find out, well, actually, that comes from, in my native language, this is what I normally would say. More often than not, native interference is the reason for the mistakes. I have that beautiful example here of the Latin brain will go to depend of. The Germanic and Slav brain will go to depend from. And neither of them are correct. And that for me is fascinating, how those are the normal mistakes for those two groups of language families. And talk to the learners about the learning process. Help them to relate to the language by making it real. Coach them around their negative beliefs. Help them to really understand that language learning may go through various plateaus. It's not just an A to B. It's kind of like a little step up and then a plateau, and then a step up and then a plateau. And literally, when we're learning a language, we're taking chunks of the language in, and our brain, it's almost like it's trying to piece together those jigsaw puzzles of the language. And then when we get that sort of feeling of, yes, we've made the connections, we're making that progress. And then we go back to adding more language into the mix. And language learning is definitely an explicit and an implicit. As children, however, it is only implicit. So we learn our native language through procedural memory, through the subconscious, through those early years in life. And the reason is because this prefrontal cortex does not start developing until after the age of 7. After the age of 7, we have the capacity to really learn explicitly rules, theory, data, information. Now, the interesting thing is that when you have explicit and implicit in a learning process, so let's imagine somebody goes to the country, immersion effect, that's implicit, bombarding the brain with the language. And then if they add grammar, let's say explicit learning, theory, exercises, rational, logical analysis of the language, then you have both explicit and implicit, and that's when we can learn extremely quickly. I know people who have gone to the country and they've done that, and in 1 year, they've learnt the language. How can we help our learners who cannot go to an immersion environment? How can we help them to understand the subconscious bombarding of the brain of the language? Definitely important conversations to have. And optimal learning, well, it's about brain states, optimal brain states. And definitely there are things that we can do that will maximize and optimize learning. Exercise, mindfulness, resting, sleep, all of this helps and optimizes learning and understanding brain states. And as educators, if we can also understand brain states, it will enhance that learning process. By the way, you know, I've spent many, many years speaking about the perfect learning state, the perfect learning state. And recently I've been given this link to the US Navy SEALs. There's a link to a video on YouTube about the Navy SEALs. And I've known for a long time about the Navy SEALs and the way that they, and DARPA, the US military, how they've gone into this accelerated learning, studying about accelerated learning. And in this video about the US Navy SEALs, they talk about the optimized learning state. So I'm not the only one that talks about the perfect learning state in life. And by the way, for each and every one of us, it might be different because we're all unique. Now let's go into the topic of today. The topic of today, we've done the warm-up, we've looked a little bit at what we're bringing in for the coaching, what we're bringing in for the neuroscience, and now we're coming into this question of, okay, how do we attack the grammar? Grammar is something that I think most learners, and I'm going to say adult learners, are traumatized by because of the way that we did it at school. None of us, I think, had a great time with grammar at school. And all of our learners come to us, adult learners, with that trauma or that distress, or I hate grammar, I can't get it, I don't understand it. So we have to definitely keep the heat off this topic with learners. And if you're with children, we have to make sure that we're not creating the trauma. So when we work with grammar, we have a two-step process. We have, firstly, we break down the grammar area. And secondly, we then build that grammar area up with coaching conversations. Now, I'm actually going to show you the coaching conversation first, and then we're going to look at the breakdowns. And then I'm going to do a demo if somebody is up for a demo. Now, when we have this conversation, the major objective is to make sure that we're getting the focus and attention where we want it to go. I I often look back at my years when I was running in and out of companies, running to and from clients from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening for many, many years. And I look back at those sessions and I really can put my hands up and say, sometimes I would go into a session with a plan, but in the session, the plan would go out the window and we'd be going round and round into different directions because the coachee would take me this way, or I would take them this way, or then we'd go off track here, or we'd go off track there. When I look back now, I actually wonder from a brain perspective how effective and efficient that was. Now, what we are focused on is getting our learners into a very focused, now we're going to do this, and then now we're going to do this. And you as a coach are managing that conversation. You're managing it. If they go off track, fantastic. Thank you for that. Great. Very interesting. May we look at that maybe in another session? May we come back to that? May I make a note of that and we address it separately? And may I just bring you back into where we are now? We finish this up and then we go to that. Because otherwise the brain is jumping around. And language learning there's so much to it. There's so many components to language learning. If we can keep them focused so that they get that bit, and then we move to the next bit, and then we move to the next bit, it's going to help them to organize more logically the language in their brain, instead of going all over the place and then they have to go away and piece it together. So focus and attention is key in this conversation. And you as the coach are the director of this orchestra. You are directing, conducting that orchestra symphony of their brain. And you're stretching them to think. This conversation is so high powered, I would say after half an hour, they will be tired. And constantly you're going to be provoking the native target. If they know it, you're just checking, consolidating, and moving on. You're not wasting time. If they don't know it, you're going to go into it. And major differences. We're moving away from eliciting. We're moving away from asking questions out of the blue, or asking questions that you're hoping that they're going to discover where you're going. We're going to be signposting and telling them, this is where we're going. I'll talk about it a bit more in a minute. We're also going to be asking them, what do you know? We're going to be asking them much more. And if they say, oh, I don't know, we're going to try and push a bit more. I always say, ping pong it back. Try to see if there's anything that they're coming up with. And stimulating curiosity. If you stimulate the curiosity, then you're going to get the dopamine production. Dopamine production is key for retention, memory, positivity. And this conversation becomes an interaction. It doesn't just become the teacher telling. We're involving them all the way, and it becomes fun. It really does. The whole conversation becomes very calm, relaxed. The coachee feels that they can ask you anything. You know how sometimes in a learning situation, we can feel bad. We can feel embarrassed. We can feel a little bit shown up, if you like. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to make our learner feel good at all times, good about not knowing, or good about making mistakes. And it really is a continuous stimulation, provocation, chunking it down, creating a framework to talk through. And this is the model. This is the model that actually it is a flowing background conversation, if you like. These are the components of the model. For those of you who are new to coaching, the first model was back in the 1970s, the GROW model, created by Sir John Whitmore, a business consultant. And when you hear the term coaching model, it actually gives you a framework of a conversation to follow. So the GROW model was goal, reality, obstacles, outcome, way forward. And as a coach, I would follow that pathway. First, we would talk about your goal, get you to set the goal. Then we would move, where are you now, reality. Then we'd go into what's stopping you, obstacles. What could you do, options. And then we'd move into the way forward, action steps. So a coaching model gives you a pathway through. Now, this particular model is giving you that sort of framework behind the grammar conversation. And by the way, behind the non-grammar conversation, and also behind creating materials with learners as well. Placement, assessment, conversation teaching, powerful questions, clarification. One thing, I will repeat this when we come to the end of the model, but one thing to say about the model, it is not linear. You're not just going to go once through it. You're going to be dancing in and out of every part of the model. You may have more PA than anything else, but you are going to be using all of it and coming back to various parts of it. And hopefully later you'll hear this in action. Now let's have a look at the placement first. Placement is I am placing my learner in the conversation. I'm signposting. I'm signposting where we are going to go. Now this is key because many times, I think on many of the language training courses, we're trained to take them into a discovery process. If you have a learner who is not getting it, that could cause major stress. So if you're asking questions, and they're not understanding, they're not getting where you're going with it, that could cause them to shut down. So to avoid that, we are constantly going to tell them where we're going, what we're doing next. So let me give you an example. We're going to talk about the present continuous. Well, in fact, we're going to talk about the present. And we're going to start off by looking at the present continuous. We're going to look at the formation first. Then we'll move into the uses. And to top it at the end, we're going to look at the trigger words, the words that indicate that we are in this tense. And afterwards, we'll move on to the present simple. So first thing, present continuous formation, looking at that affirmative formation. And then I would go into my questions. And then we'd go into the dialogue around it. Once my learner has got that, and we're solid there, I would summarize and say, okay, we've looked at all the formation. We've looked at how to create it with the verb to be, the ing. We've looked at a few of the verbs. Now we're going to look at how we would create the question form. So every step of the way, I'm going to summarize, signpost, summarize, signpost. By the way, summarizing is also bringing it back to them. They're hearing it again. They're consolidating it. They're consolidating it all the way through. Signposting is extremely, extremely important because it brings certainty to the learner. There will never be a surprise question. They will feel safe. And when they feel safe, they get calmer. Noticeably calmer. So that's the placement. Now, assessment, you know, one of the tendencies as teachers, when we go into an area, we have a tendency to explain it first. And what we're going to do is we're going to stop doing that. And as this cognitive neuroscientist beautifully states, he is a university lecturer. Well, he was a university lecturer, and he realized that by explaining things, they weren't getting it, but by getting them to explain it to him, or them to try to explain it to him, they were getting it. So literally, he stopped explaining. And this in some ways is what we're going to be doing too. We're going to be asking them, what do you know about this, if anything? And we're trying to find out, where are you scaffolding from? What knowledge do you have about this? And that will give you the entry point for every single learner. If it's a beginner and they don't know it, fine. Then we'll start from scratch. If they know something, false beginner, okay, let's build on those neural networks that are missing. If they know it, okay, we're not going to waste time, we're moving on. And this is also a problem, that if we are explaining it first and they know it, you've lost them, because they're just going to switch off. They've heard it 3,000 times before. So it's very important to know, if they know it, move on. We're not wasting time. And this reminds us of the importance to scaffold. We need to know where they are scaffolding from. If I know that, I can help you fill in the gaps. Or I can help you build the new networks that you need. And if my learner says, yes, I know it, then I would get them into examples. Or if we've just introduced some new information, then I would get them into examples, conversations, and making it real and personal. This is what we said earlier: relevance, context, real, personal. And get them using it instantly. And if they don't know something, that's when I'm going to introduce it with a lot of permission. So very gentle introduction of new information. May I share with you? How about, could we just talk about something new here? And I may try to find out, how is this in your native language? To see if I can springboard from there. You know, sometimes you may be able to springboard. For example, in Spanish, the present continuous is exactly the same as in English. The verb to be and an ing ending, which is the gerund, or the participle in Spanish. It's exactly the same formation. So if I can scaffold from there, brilliant. If I can't, then I'm introducing new information. And what I would do is introduce a little bit and then ask them to try it. So I would give them a little bit of information, a few examples, and then I would get them to give me some examples back. So that we've got this interaction. There's not, again, we're not explaining and explaining and explaining and then saying, okay, you do it. We're getting them involved all the way. Now, through this conversation, we're going to have, I actually normally say we pepper this conversation with powerful questions. Two types. First type, powerful coaching questions. How do you feel? How can I help? What do you need at this point? Second type of powerful questions, native target. How is this in your language? How is it similar? How is it different? Where are the differences? How about we talk it through and see, because in English it's this way, and I'm hearing in your language it's this way. How about we build up that sort of separation of the two languages and the differences in both of them? because we know that the brain does care. The brain does care about the grammatical structures from the native language. And this is why we're provoking as much as we can, helping the brain to pattern as well. And finally, we have clarification along the way. Am I hearing this? Is this what you're saying? Can I just check? Is this what you mean? Now, as I mentioned earlier, the model itself is not linear. You may start with placement, assessment, powerful question, placement, assessment, teach, placement, assessment, teach, conversation, placement, assessment, powerful question, teach, powerful question, conversation, clarification. So you're dancing and adapting to what's coming out from the learner. By the way, this is pure coaching because you're sitting in the moment. It's coaching presence. You're really in that spontaneous, but you have a framework in the background with the grammar, but you are sitting and dancing with that coaching. No two grammar conversations will ever be the same. They'll always be different. You have your framework. Your framework is always the same, but your coachees will take you in different ways according to their knowledge. Now, that's the coaching conversation. And this is now, we're looking at step one. We did it the other way around. Step one is to break the grammar down. Now, one of the things I always say when we're doing the course together is that a lot of our grammar books, by the way, Murphy is my Bible, always has been. I love Murphy's grammar books. But a lot of the grammar books are very disjointed. So the topics themselves may cover many, many pages, and it's almost like that. There's nothing to join the dots. There's no big picture. So what we are looking at is creating big pictures. So instead of a little like prepositions in, on, at, from there, I'm going to zoom out to create a big picture around those prepositions. So if I take the whole topic of prepositions, how could I create a step-by-step logical breakdown to build that topic up with my learner? Instead of having prepositions all over the place and my learner's brain going, oh, another preposition. Now, when you do these breakdowns, it's not about creating examples. It's not about demonstrating the use of the prepositions. It's about you creating a script. And your script is your framework to take the conversation step by step through that grammar area. Now, you could create a big picture of the present, where you've got all of the topic of the present. You could create a big picture around passives, around narrative tenses, around phrasal verbs. You could create a big picture about all different grammar areas. And you can cluster those areas together, or you can have them separately. And then, according to the level of your learner, you will do as much or as little of that big picture with them. But the big picture, you have it in the background for you, because it's your pathway through. And it's about you understanding how to connect the dots in that topic. That's the key point. How do you connect the dots? And how do you then help them to connect the dots? And you can do this for any language. you can really sit down and create these breakdowns for any language. And then we build them up with the coaching model, PACT PQC. Now I'm actually going to go onto the whiteboard in a minute, and we're going to do a bigger breakdown of the conditionals. So let me just stop that share a minute, and let me just share with you how I would sit and break this down into a pathway. Now, we all know that conditionals it's a pretty hefty topic. And I think each and every one of us at some point in our lives kind of thought, oh my God, conditionals. Oh, how am I going to get this through to my learner? So what we're looking to create here is the big picture of this topic. And when you're creating this picture, we're looking to start right from the beginning and build it up. So I would probably start with some small talk with my learner around this topic. And I might sort of go into that general introduction, which is, well, what are conditionals and where do we use them in daily life? Just to get them warmed up, that could be an entry point as an intro. Remember, I'm creating a script here. That's the major focus of this. Now then, if I go into a sort of a general with my learner, we could talk about, okay, well, what types are there? And then we could go into the structure of the if sentence, if you like. And just get them familiar with the structure. If, then. But we could also have then, if. So get them understanding that there could be an inversion. If it rains, I will go out. I will go out if it rains. So we've got two sides and the structure is there. Now I would then break this down even further, and I would go into each and every one of them. Slowly, we're going to build up this conversation. So firstly, we're going to take the 0. And in each of these mini conversations, I'm going to create a pattern of going through it. So the first thing would be, how do we form it? Second thing would be, when do we use it? And the third would be sort of any additional remarks that we need to address. And in this one, we need to address if and when. And I would do the same with first. So with first, I would go into the formation and the use. Any additional comments? Actually, in this one, no, it's quite a straightforward one. Then I would go to the second. Formation, use. Now, remember, everybody, I'm not saying that this is what I'm doing with my learner. I'm saying this is my script for me. And I'm building up my script of a pathway through the conversation with my learner. Additional comment here would be the remnant of the subjunctive. Were. If I were. And then I would go to the third, formation, and uses, because in the third we have various uses. Now, still creating this big picture, there's quite a few things that we need to add still. So we've gone through each and every one of them. Normally, when I come to mixed conditionals, I often think it would be, and especially if you've got logical, analytical brains, and I've done this with a lot of German engineers, and they love it. If you can get them to create a table where they use conditionals in the form of an equation, if X, then Y. And you get them to create the table. So the zero conditional, if present, then present. First conditional, if present, then future. Second, if past, then conditional. And third, if past perfect, then conditional perfect. Now, by creating this table, you've then got a beautiful playground for mixed conditionals. And they can play with, can I use the first part of number 1 with number 3? Can I use the first part of number 2 with number 3? And they can really play with this, you know, like little kiddies where you join the arrows and you can create lines from one to the other. It's a beautiful playground. That could be how we deal with mixed. Now, still in this topic, there's still things that we need to address. We need to look at alternatives to if. So we could have if versus whether, if versus unless. We could also have the more formal and legal ifs, provided that, in the event that, in case that, should you, da da da. Now, still within this topic, we could also look at conditionals with modals. You might even look at some conditionals with infinitives or constructions with infinitives. If I were to stay. Still within this big picture, we may need to add the conditional as a tense. Not only in an if sentence, it also is, if you want to call it a tense, an aspect. I would like to go. You could also take it into the realms of polite questions. And finally, if we really have a big picture here, we would need to bring in wishes. I wish you would not or I wish you would. Now, this is our big picture, everybody. This is the big picture. Could we say that we've got everything in there for conditionals? Am I missing anything? I might have missed something. Have I missed anything? How are you all feeling with that big picture of conditionals? Claudia, I can see you're nodding. Yes. You know, it's interesting because when we have a big picture, it calms us down. It helps us to think, oh, okay, yeah, that's the whole topic of conditionals in a very simple, logical, step-by-step form. Okay, you may need to go and get your examples, get yourself with, you know, how do I do each part? Fine. But what you have is your step-by-step way through the conversation. Now, if you've got a beginner, or let's say a lower level, you're never going to do all of this. You will do the part that corresponds to that learner. But if I've got let's say I've got a C1 who is confused with all of this, we would literally take it step by step by step, checking in and making sure that my C1 is in the right place in every single aspect and angle of this conversation. And in fact, this roadmap like this, by taking my C1 through it, we're going to smoke out the problems. Because where my C1 says, no, I've got this, fine, brilliant, let's move on. We're not going to waste time. And every single time we keep moving on until we find the pain, the problem. So it's actually a lovely way to detect the problems that people have in these topics, because sometimes it's not clear for us where they are. Now, as I mentioned, you can do this with every single grammar topic, and you can also do it with every single language. You may have to sit down and think about it, but once you've got it forever. You've really got it forever once you've got it. Now, who would like to be my coachee? Let's do a little bit of a demo here with this conversation. Would anybody like to be my coachee on the other side? Nobody wants to demo with me. We could do it in Spanish if you want, if somebody wants to learn Spanish. We could do Spanish conditionals. Hi, Veronica. Thank you for turning on your camera there. Hi, hi. Opening up again the invitation. Would anybody like to try this with me? Or would you like to try another grammar topic? Veronica, gracias. Veronica, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to unmute there. Just let me see if we can get you onto the microphone.
Okay.
Hi, Veronica. Where are you located?
Nice to meet you. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
From Buenos Aires. Beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful
Yes.
country.
And now it's 6 o'clock here. It's very early.
It is early, yes, yes. Well, thank you for doing this. And on top of that, conditionals. Would you prefer a more gentle grammar area?
No, it's okay. Yes.
It's okay. Go through this.
Okay. Yeah.
Veronica, we'll just do a snapshot. So we'll just probably do about 10 minutes just to, what I want to do is demonstrate this conversation that we have in the background, which is the PACT PQC, with this as my railway track, so that everybody can feel the way that we're going through the conversation. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Okay, Veronica, so we're imagining that you're my learner. This is one of your goals, to get conditionals into the right place. And in our session today, we're going to start off by really focusing in and going through the conditionals step by step by step. Is that okay with you?
Fine, yes.
Great. So to start with, I'd love us just to have a warm-up. And I would like to really just check in with you about what conditionals are and when we use them in daily life.
Fine.
So what do you think they are in daily life?
They can be hypotheses, they can be real facts. Well, first real facts, then hypotheses, then regrets. Maybe the third conditional can be regrets, yes, for something that you didn't do. So
yes,
yes,
absolutely. And in your daily life, with your conversations that you have with family, friends, etc., when can you think that you're using them?
Well, in different contexts or different situations. For example, I don't know, for example, if you say, well, if I go to Carrefour, I can get lower prices. I don't know.
Right, so shopping.
Yes, shopping.
Yeah.
Or, for example, for when you are, I don't know how to say it, but when you say, well, if you had told me earlier, I would have done this and this and that. It's very common to say that. In Argentina, we use a lot of if clauses and sentences. Yes, we use it a lot.
And I guess that's with family, kids, you know,
this,
yes,
of course.
Yes, okay, brilliant.
Friends, colleagues.
So we're getting it into real life here. Now, just to check in with you, there are various types of conditionals. Yeah. Can I check if you know the various types?
Pardon?
There are various types of conditionals, and just want to check if you know the various types.
Yes, I know. Yes, I know the difference.
Difference. Okay.
Both in English and in Spanish. In Spanish, it's the same.
Yeah.
Spanish, it's the same.
Yes.
We use the if, we use when, we use whether, unless.
Yeah.
Yes, we use them a lot.
Yeah, and in Spanish you have that joyful journey into subjunctives.
Subjunctives, and we have the past perfect also.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll check in along the way now. So what I'd like to do, I'd like us to take each of the types. We're going to check in that you're okay with it, and then we'll move to the next and then to the next, and we're going to build up the conversation in that way.
Fine.
If we take the first one, the zero conditional,
yeah.
We look at the formation of that. What can you tell me about the formation of the zero?
Could be if plus present, comma, present.
Right. And may I ask you if you can give me an example of something that comes to mind for that?
Yes. For example, if you put water on a stove, it boils at 100 centigrades.
Brilliant. Now, out of curiosity, is it the same in Spanish?
Yes, it's the same. Present. Yes.
Right. So
Here we say,
beautiful
por ejemplo, decimos, si pones agua sobre una hornalla,
sí,
hierve a 100 grados centígrados.
sí. Entonces, el present, present.
Yes. Sí.
Beautiful correlation. Now, looking at the uses of the zero, when do we use it?
When you talk about real facts.
Yeah.
Real truth.
Yeah.
Real truth.
Brilliant. Veronica, fantastic. Now, out of curiosity, and we'll look at this in Spanish as well. In English, we can use if water is on a stove or you put water on a stove, or we could say when you put
when. Yes, yes.
Is it the same in Spanish?
The same. Cuando pones agua al fuego,
yeah,
hierve a 100 grados centígrados. Yes, when or if. Yes.
Right. And what would you say is the difference then between if and when?
Like if and when. Well, the difference is very subtle. I don't know how to distinguish them. Yes.
You're absolutely right. It's extremely subtle. Let me say it to you in Spanish and see how you feel. Si pongo agua a hervir, hierve a 100 grados. Cuando pongo agua a hervir, hierve a 100 grados. ¿Cómo te sientes? How do you feel when you say one or the other?
Maybe the first one is much more common in Argentina.
Right, sí. Okay, if you do this, then right.
Yes.
Can I share with you, which one feels more concrete?
No.
If or when?
Both.
Right. As you
said, like a condition, and
yeah.
when it's like a real situation. It's more concrete when you say when.
It makes it feel a little bit more when this happens. And if a little bit more that feeling of hypothesis, even though we're dealing with truth and fact, when seems to give it more weight.
Yes.
Very subtle. It's like you said. How do you feel with that?
Yes, that it's more common. I don't know if you say if you put or when you put. Yes, one is the hypothesis and the other is when you put like something definite, something more concrete when you say when. Yes,
yes. Let me give you another example. If I eat too much, I get fat. When I eat too much, I get fat.
If you use when, is that because you're already doing it, maybe like a consequence of your acts.
It feels like I have that experience. Yes, I know. Yes. Brilliant.
Something that is happening to you right now.
Well, or more that feeling of I really know this will happen. I know that when I do this, this happens. It really is a truth.
Yes, consequence of my actions, and it's a truth. Yes.
Absolutely. And as you said, it's really subtle. This difference is so subtle.
Yes.
But we could use it to bring in more depth to the experience. Yeah. Right. Now, Veronica, we're actually going to stop there because you and I could be here all day with this, having this going on and flowing. And I just wanted to demo how we would then sort of take this into just a quiet conversation, step by step building up. We would then go to the first formation, use, getting you to give me examples, seeing how you're feeling with it. Then we go to the second, and we'd be building up. Veronica, how did it feel to have that conversation with me?
A little challenging, and no, it
To
was very
everybody.
nice. It was very nice, and I was able to review some grammar that, well, I have learned
Yeah, yeah,
a long time ago.
yeah. Yes, yes. But thank you. And it was really that sort of wanting to get it into that flowing conversation and just interacting, very calm. And thank you
Yes,
for it in front of
very
everybody.
nice. No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Gracias. Okay. Coming back into the group. Can you all get the feeling of that PACT PQC in the background? And this is sort of this, you know, it really is. Once you get it automated, you can fully focus on your learner much more. And you start to pick up where they have the problems, where you need to come in, where you need to go more, where you can move on. And it sort of builds up that flow. And grammar, honestly, it becomes a curiosity arousing conversation. We've had a lot of people doing grammar with our coaches, and it's totally transformed them. Totally. I know we've got some of our coaches here today. I know you're doing some amazing work out there. In a minute, I'll open up the microphones for everybody. Now, just want to say as well that you do have the Brain Friendly Grammar book, which is full of breakdowns. So for anybody who picks this up thinking it's a normal grammar book, it's not. It is literally a book full of scripts breaking down the grammar all the way through, and all different types of topics with a step-by-step build-up all the way through. All different types, gerund, etc., are in there. So we're concluding today now with this intro to brain-friendly grammar. I know for some of you as the coaches out there, it was a little bit of a refresher. And if you are interested for more information, do connect with us on those addresses. And as we've said so many times, definitely education is the training of the mind to think, not so much the learning of the facts. And that's what we're doing with everything that we do in neurolanguage coaching.